In this session, I'm going to begin a discussion of some research by Koken and some of her colleagues that is an examination of both male and female independent online escorts. So in this research, she compares and contrasts online male and female escorts with regard to many different features and facets of their lives and occupations. And I want to begin by noting, as she does, that some of these individuals start off as independent escorts. And when we're talking about independent online escorts, what that means is the people that they interviewed in the study were not working currently for escort agencies. Some escorts work for agencies. There are escort agencies that are online, and they then will work to connect clients with providers, and they'll range many things. We'll talk a little bit about that as we proceed through this lecture, but all the ones that they studied, all the escorts they studied in this research were working independently. They were not currently affiliated with an agency. Now, some of them had in the past, as we'll see, worked with an agency, but were now working independently. Some of them had just began their careers working independently and never had any experience working with agencies. One of the things they note in this study is that some, and this is not to suggest most, but some of the escorts that they interviewed were actually involved in adult movies. They're porn actors. And they note in this article that this is a niche market. There are some people who have experience, sometimes a few, sometimes a lot of involvement in porn, and what they will do is they will work as escorts as well. Part of the reason for this is that, as discussed in a video that I'll show in the face-to-face course, often it's a 2000-ish, I think around 2000 video from public broadcasting, from public television, from the Frontline series, and the title of the video is American Porn. If you want to look it up sometime, you can go to pbs.org and look at this, and if you want to, you could watch this online. And in this article, in this video, they note that porn stars don't make nearly as much money. Now, there are some people at the very top that make a lot of money, but a lot of the actors and actresses in porn don't make a whole lot of money. They may only get $1,000 or $1,500 for one video that they make. And so some people who are involved in porn then can go out and work as escorts and make $300, $500, or sometimes $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 an hour, depending upon their own marketability. So some people who have some involvement, or some people who've had even a lot of involvement in porn, also work as escorts and are available online for people to meet and hire their services. And I'm not even suggesting that that's true of most porn actors. It's just true of some of them, and it's a niche market that people can find when they look at and looking for internet escorts. In terms of screening, I want to talk about what they discuss with regard to screening clients or potential clients. And one of the things that they note in this study is that typically escort agencies do not collect as much information about or from potential clients as do independent escorts. So typically, those who are working as independent escorts collect more information from potential clients than do the agencies themselves. Now, people who are working online as escorts, in terms of screening, what they want to screen for, I want you to know that they need to screen for, first of all, the police. So sometimes they'll develop questions and just try to sort of get a feeling for people, because one of the things they want to screen for is police. They want to try to avoid some police officer who is working undercover and posing as a client. A second type of person for whom they want to screen are risky clients. And a third thing that they note in this point in their article is that they also need to learn how, as part of the screening process, how to negotiate sexual boundaries with clients. So they need to be able to state while talking to clients or about what types of sexual activities are acceptable to them, as a way to make sure that a client's not seeking some kind of service that they don't offer, and that a client won't try to, once they meet with them, push for something that's not acceptable to them. And also they want to, during this process, make sure that they have agreed upon a fee, that there is a set fee and this is understood by the client, and the client won't try to haggle them down later once they meet or after some interaction has occurred. People who are involved in prostitution, like people who are involved in other forms of behaviors that are sociologically deviant, that are stigmatized, that are negatively sanctioned by the larger society, often wish to avoid stigma. And as a way to avoid stigma, what these escorts often do is some escorts do not tell friends or family that they are involved in escorting. And Koken and her fellow researchers note that the effort that's put forth to avoid stigma actually can make it difficult for escorts to maintain their safety. And the reason for that is when those who don't have friends, or sometimes even some people who are working as escorts don't even know other escorts with whom they can have communications. But if you have a friend or other escort who you know and they are aware of the fact that you are involved in escorting, that can be helpful, because what they can do is you can tell someone, okay, I'm going on a date at this time, I'm going to this location. If you don't hear back from me at a certain time, call the police, call the authorities, let them know where I was going, what time I was supposed to be there, what time I was supposed to be leaving. So many times those who do have friends or those who work for agencies, of course, would do that. The agencies would take this role, or sometimes people who have other escorts who are friends, they will send them an email, they'll send them a text or give them a call and let them know where they're going to be and a time period from which they should be at this place, and then if you don't hear from them, to please contact the police. But if you're completely keeping this hidden from everyone, this is something that is not available in terms of a service that could be associated with helping to maintain a person's safety. Additionally, I would note that escorts who have associations with other escorts can benefit by the fact that they often share information about potentially problematic clients. So they'll often blacklist people, and they will share names and contact information from people who are problematic, who are physically problematic, who are sexually problematic, who are weird or strange, or just make people feel uncomfortable physically or sexually. And so if you're not having any contact with other escorts as a way to try to avoid the stigma associated with prostitution, then you don't have access to that type of information, and so that makes it more difficult for someone to maintain their safety as well. Escorts often take advantage of other escort ads that they see on sites where they're advertising or on other sites, and as well as client review sites. And how this can be helpful is this: when looking at ads of other escorts and when looking at client review sites, there are sites online where clients actually review their experiences with specific escorts, and they can rate them, give them so many stars. For instance, on some sites, they give them a number rating, but also there's often a little narrative section where they can describe the experience as well. With regard to the escort ads that are placed, there are ways in which women can describe themselves, like check boxes to, for their age and their race and measurements and so forth. But they're often on escort sites, websites. There are often little areas where people will have like sort of an about me section where they can customize their ad and put in descriptors about services they offer, their personality, their interests, and so forth. They can just write a narrative, whatever kind of narrative they want. They can structure it in a way that reveals aspects of themselves, or as a way to try to entice clients to hire them. And so the point I want to make here is that for those who are considering becoming involved in escorting, escort ads and client review sites, Koken and her colleagues note, these can be mechanisms by which people who are considering becoming involved in escorting can both, two things here: learn about advertising so they can see what kinds of things are commonly mentioned by other escorts in their advertising, and then use that information to structure their own ads in ways that will make them more attractive for customers. And the second thing they note, that looking at these ads as well as the client review sites, is this allows them to develop some understanding of customer expectations. In terms of the data that we have for this study, basically there are two studies, let me say it this way. There are two different studies by Koken and her colleagues, and data that were collected in two different time periods, one for male escorts, one for female escorts. And I'm going to say a little bit about the data, and then in this analysis they compare these two data sets to compare and contrast, like I said earlier, the experiences of male escorts versus female escorts who are working online. So in this study, they have published an analysis comparing data that were collected in two different time periods. The sample of gay men and bisexual males, all right, so for the male escorts, and these male, let me make clear, these male independent online escorts, these are men who are providing services to other men, all right, so these are not gigolos, these are not men who are providing sexual services to women. So these data were collected in fall 2000. Like I said, it's a sample of gay and bisexual males. The sample size is 46. Now this study, as well as the study of females that they discuss in this article, these are both non-representative convenience samples. Right? Both of the studies from which they draw in this paper, the previous analyses, were both non-representative convenience samples. And just refer back to the sheet that I've posted on Blackboard that discusses probability samples versus convenience samples and issues of generalizability that are associated with non-probability convenience samples compared to studies where we do have a sample that's representative and therefore can be used to generalize to larger population. The data for the females in this analysis comes from a study that data that they collected between basically fall 2007 through February 2008. And so for the females, there were 30 respondents. Now, you don't need to know the dates and you don't need to know the number of respondents for each of these studies. I do want you to know something about the age, though. The males, for the data they collected from men who were offering sexual services to men, the mean age, the average age, was 39. The range for men in their study was 22 to 47. Now, for their study of women escorts, the average, or the mean, was 34, and the range was 21 to 57. Now, one point I want to make here is that these data seem perhaps to be somewhat older than I would expect. And this makes me question, like I said, this already, they do have a non-representative convenience sample. We cannot generalize from these data to male escorts online or female escorts online because they don't have a probability sample of escorts. It's a convenience sample of a small number of escorts in both of those studies from which they are now drawing information and comparing male and female escorts. And so to compare perhaps from a sample that's more probable, a couple of samples that have higher have better representativeness, most likely I've had you read this semester, or you will read for this exam period, an article that I published in 2005 and another article that I published with Dr. Kroll in our department in 2011. And in the 2005 publication, and I'll just reference this because sometimes I use this, I may not use this semester, so in case I don't, let me just reference this here. And the same thing with regard to the article by Pruitt and Kroll. I'm going to give you some information just in case I'm not using that reading this semester. But in the 2005 publication, I looked at male escort advertisements. I looked at one website, all right? But this website was national in scope. And I took a probability sample of those ads. And with regard to the publication in 2011, that Dr. Kroll and I were involved in, we had, we looked at a female escort site, one website, and again, this is one that was national in scope. And in both of those studies I was involved with, we have a probability sample of the ads on these national websites. So comparatively, our data are much more generalizable than the data that are being used here by Koken and her colleagues. Now, we can't say that our data are completely representative of all escorts. We did not do a representative sample of all escorts online or across a bunch of different escort websites. But what we did do is we chose websites in both cases that were national in scope, and we took a representative sample of escorts from each of those websites. And the thing that's also nice about our study is that since we just printed out these ads and did a content analysis of these ads, we didn't have to ask people, would you like to participate in the study, and then perhaps having some sizable portion say that no, they would not. And so basically we don't have the selection bias problem that's often associated with people dropping out, not wanting to participate in a study. Therefore you get a smaller response rate, a lower response rate, which makes it more problematic to generalize from those data. Instead, in our study, it was a content analysis which printed out the ads for everyone that was part of our sample and did an analysis of them. And so we don't have a low response rate that's associated with people not wanting to participate in a study. So in our data, what we see in my study, first of all, from 2005, the mean average age was 27.2 with a range of 18 to 50. And so 27.2 is considerably lower than the mean age of 39 that we see in these data. And then in the study that Dr. Kroll and I were involved in that was published in 2011, we had a mean age of 25.9. And again, that's considerably lower than the mean of 34, which they have in these data, Koken and her colleagues. So the takeaway here is I want you to be aware that quite likely these data are comprised of men and women who are older than perhaps is true of most male and female escorts who are working online. And I feel rather confident making that assertion because in our data, as I noted, we were basically looking at websites that are national in scope, and also we were not interviewing people, and when you interview people, it's a lot more involved in terms of the data you're collecting and getting, and even, of course, getting informed consent and those types of things. But when you interview people, some people say, and sometimes a sizable number, are not willing to participate, and you can get a pretty low response rate. And when you have a low response rate, the data are much less generalizable than when you have a higher response rate.